Hey, this is Sanyam Bhutani, and you're listening to Chai Time Data Science, a podcast for data science enthusiasts where I interview practitioners, researchers, and Kagglers about their journey, experience, and talk all things about data science. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chai Time Data Science Show. In this episode, I interview John Miller, data scientist at H2O.ai. John Miller is one of the people similar from the league of guests on the show who started working in data science even before it was called data science. And in this interview, we talk about his journey and how data science and his work has evolved over the years. John has contributed to different roles, and we talk about all of them, including his current work at H2O.ai. We also discuss his winning solution to the NFL First and Future Analytics Kaggle competition, where John had even created a real world impact via Kaggle competition. Yes, via a Kaggle competition, even in the previous year, where he had won the competition, and his findings led to the change of a rule. Similar to last year, John has again won the competition this year as well. And we talk about his findings about the NFL and his discoveries while working on the competition. I also ask John, why is football not called hand egg? Jokes aside, this is a conversation where we really connect Kaggle, real world data science, and learning and improving on data science in a single interview. So without further ado, here's my interview with John Miller. Please enjoy the show. And a quick reminder to the non-native English speaking audience, please remember to go to YouTube and enable the subtitles for this video for a better watching experience. Those have been manually checked and re-uploaded. For now, here's the conversation. Please enjoy the show. Hi everyone, I'm excited to be talking to another maker on the podcast today. John, thank you so much for joining me on the series.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start by talking about your background. And you've been winning the NFL competition for 2 years straight. And usually I would expect someone like this to have a CS background. Maybe I'm biased and I am propagating that. But I found out you did your bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering. How did data science come into the picture for you? When did you find your passion?
Well, when I got my master's in engineering, I went through a dual degree program, and it also offered a master's in business. And I focused a lot in operations research, and so that's what kind of led me into that area, doing a lot of applied statistics, optimization, all of the things that used to be associated with OR. Over the years, I found that, I started hearing about data science, and I started hearing about things like random forest and all of these cool things, decision tree models and such, and realized that, I hadn't kept up with the tools. And so I actually had a chance to do some work, kind of get up to speed when I had a knee injury. So, I was laid up for about a week or two, and just said, all right, now's the perfect time for me to start learning about what's new in data science and these things, and just jumped in and just really loved it and turned my focus that way and went forward.
Okay. Now, talking about your background, you worked across multiple roles in your previous life. Can you tell us about the industries that you've contributed to that I think would help us connect the dots of how you got to becoming a data scientist today?
Sure. Yeah. So, when I came out of graduate school, I took a job in consulting, which I never thought I would do, but it turned out to be great because prior to that, I had only government experience. I didn't have really, corporate sector experience. And so it was a great way for me to see lots of different companies and see many environments in a fairly short amount of time. I mean, over the years, it's been a while, but, I've probably been in and out of over a dozen companies, and most of them like larger Fortune 500 companies. So that was really helpful. And yeah, I've done work. There's most of my work has been functionally oriented. So towards operations improvement and applied statistics. Not so much industry related, but I found myself working a lot in financial services. Did probably 2 or 3 years in oil and gas, a little bit in media. So, but in media, it was really the large cable company providers. And so, in the U.S., we have Charter and Comcast and those sorts of companies. So I did some work with them, and it really just gave me, sort of a broad base of knowledge and business processes and things like that.
That sounds almost like you were working with big data before it was called big data. Was that the case?
Yeah, in some cases it was. So there was a project I had years ago where a big cable company was taking over the properties of another cable company, and so they do swaps and that sort of thing, from time to time. And they had to migrate millions of customers in the U.S. onto their new system, and the big thing was all around the internet and the wireless portion. So. It was just a disaster to begin with. They found that it was a lot harder than they imagined, and things started going south. And so they asked me to come in and a couple other folks. And one of the things we did then was we built a forecasting model, and it was really applying, a lot of things that we know as data science today. There was some time series forecasting, but then there was also some regression modeling.
Okay.
And we took those and we actually made an ensemble, which before I even, heard the term ensemble, we were combining these because they each brought different things to the table. So combining those models really worked well. And we were able to forecast. What we did with that is we were able to forecast the daily volume of service calls that they were going to get. And then that allowed them to staff up in advance and not be so reactive. And they were able to react much better for the remaining couple of months during the migration.
Awesome. So you just described the complete data science pipeline to us. Now,
Yeah, that's right.
now coming to what you're currently working on, you're a customer data scientist at S2O. Can you tell us more about the tasks you're working on, and why do we need to have customer data scientists? Isn't AutoML supposed to replace us all?
That's a good question. And so, it's funny because people say that about every technology that comes along. I think, every new field, people will say, "Oh, this is going to replace us all." And even when I used to do a lot of operations improvement, we would take something that was taking people hours to do and change it into minutes. And very rarely, I think only one time out of many, where people actually let go or even reassigned. What happens, and the same with with AutoML and driverless, is it frees up data scientists to do more value added work. So you see all the statistics out there, how data scientists spend so much time prepping data and all of this. The feature engineering, which you're still going to need, but really just like trying many different algorithms, all the different encodings that one can do, combining features, that sort of thing, and then doing feature selection. Those things take a lot of time manually, even if you have a system for it. So yeah, I think what driverless does, and this is kind of our pitch, is that it automates a lot of that. The data scientists can then spend their time working with the business owners to figure out what's important to them. They can design the models with the right output. They can think about which metrics to use, all of these good things that you'll always, at least for the foreseeable future, you'll need a data scientist for.
I don't want to sound too smart here because I'm not, but again falls back to the philosophical question of being more creative as human beings and leaving the machines to do the dumb work, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean that's it in a nutshell for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And then you asked, I think, about what I did or what I do now in my role.
Yes.
Okay.
Does it involve having chai with the grandmasters all the time, or are you working on problems, or are you translating business problems into driverless AI?
Yes, chai with the grandmasters. We sit around and we philosophize about data science. And no, I'm not a grandmaster, but I do have some chai tea, so I did bring that, and it's very tasty, my latte. Just a
I
word
have
on that
H2O
before.
next to me. I think it's better for my health.
And H2O and chai tea, we have it covered. All right. Uh, so I'll answer your question first. I do want to address the the chai tea thing. One thing that is really cool about my current role is that I have access to the grandmasters, because we all work together, and even though we're not on the same projects, we have Slack and all of the great tools that we have now. And so I see a lot of times, and others, you probably see this, you probably see it, where somebody has an issue and they'll say, hey, I'm trying to figure this out, and they'll put it out on Slack. And then one of the grandmasters will come back and say, oh, well, maybe try this because this is what's worked for me.
Yeah.
And so even that real-time collaboration, with folks like me on the customer side is pretty cool. So what I do, is I work on the customer side. I work with companies who have bought our products, usually driverless AI. And in this case, I'm working with a large accounting firm. And they provide various accounting services, including audits and that sort of thing. And they're using driverless AI to help predict some certain things and to automate one of their processes. And it's one of those just highly manual grinding processes. In the past, you have paper documents or image documents, and you can OCR those documents. You can run them through OCR, but it still doesn't give you the context of what's on the paper. So you can have a number, and well, maybe it's a date, or maybe it's an account number, or maybe it's a balance. It could be any number of things. Words, of course, in different contexts mean different things.
Yeah.
And so it's always taken a person to look at that and say, okay, well, here's what I'm looking at, and enter that into the right column of whatever they're, digitizing their system. And so what they're doing now is they're using driverless to help classify those documents and the terms and everything in the documents. And I help with that. So I'm helping them build that pipeline so that it's a production level pipeline where they can take, they're a global firm, and they have, these documents coming in from all sources. And so they want to be able to basically take them in, and with about a 2-minute turnaround right now, digitize those documents and capture the information the way it needs to be captured.
I want to talk about another aspect. Like, you elaborated of the pipeline for us in a very neat fashion, and you talk a lot about this in a blog post that I'll have in the show notes. But did you translate the business problem for us? And I know you're a propeller of talking to business persons as a data scientist, because those two worlds don't connect so much. And I'd love to know your thoughts about how you got better at it, or why do you think it's important for all the data scientists to be able to have that skill?
Sure. For me, it was something that came as a result of the work that I did. I started out in operations, and I worked as an operations consultant, and, I found myself at some point, being a team lead, a project lead, manager, that sort of thing. And so there, my job was really to be that person that worked with the business folks all the time, help them translate it into something the team could work on. And ended up doing like a lot of just what I would call general management consulting. And then at some point, I realized that I was doing more PowerPoint than Excel or data science or anything. And I was like, all right, time out. I'm a numbers guy, and I want to get back to doing numbers. And so that's what I did. I started, that's when I really got, fully back into data science and actually doing a lot of coding and building predictive models. But the good thing was that those years of experience have helped me understand the process from a business person's perspective. And I've been in a lot of meetings where, especially technical people present, and the questions are a lot of times the same, why are you telling me this? And so, as data scientists, I think it's important to always talk about why you're doing something and kind of give the bottom line up front. And there's other things like that can help give you things from a business person's perspective. So doing those things just really helps communicate. I learned those firsthand, and a lot of times the hard way, because I've been that person too. I've been the person that starts talking about the different algorithms and whatever. And, someone stopped me and said, okay, just tell me what this means to us and what we should do about it. So, okay, let's start with that. So yeah, so I think it's important. I think it's always good to get out and talk with folks and get a different perspective. It's very easy, especially if you're introverted, and I am an introvert, and so I like to sit in front of my computer and do my work and respond to emails. But I found that if you force yourself to go meet somebody, talk to them a little bit, even just a phone call, you can learn so much about what's important to them, and that makes you better as a data scientist. It really helps you focus your work.
Okay. Coming to another term that's synonymous with data science and also is to Kaggle. Can you tell us how did your Kaggle journey start? How did you discover the platform and sign up for your first competition there?
Yeah, when I was actually recovering from the knee surgery, I was reading up on data science, and there were a lot of great blogs and things out there. And I need to find out who it was, but there was a really good blog that I was reading, and the guy who wrote it said, look, coursework is great and this and that, but don't delay. Just get out and do it. He said, go on Kaggle and start on the Titanic competition. Uh, and so that's what I did. And of course, a lot of it, I had no idea what I was doing. At the time I worked primarily in R. So now I
Okay.
use mostly Python, but at the time I used R. And so I was getting these R scripts and reading, and Kaggle's so great because, you can see these really world-class notebooks or scripts that, masters and grandmasters have written, and it's good stuff. And so I just started going through that and learning it, and doing a lot of looking at the API documents for the libraries to figure out what those functions meant. A lot of Stack Overflow googling, which I still do today, and just started building my knowledge that way. And it was great advice. It's advice that I also give people. Is they're like, where do we start? What do we do? It's like, well, when you think you're ready, or even before you think you're ready, just go try Titanic. Go there and look at someone's code and just copy it over and look at the outputs and kind of learn as you go. And I found it to be a great way to pick things up. So that's how I got started. And then, like most people, like once you pick up a little bit of knowledge, you try your first real competition. And so I did that. And of course I was just dreadful, but I kept on going, and you get to a point where you get hooked, it's like just so fun, and you're trying to climb that leaderboard and tune your algorithm, and there's the social aspect of it. I like all of it.
Okay. Now, do you think, or if you could point to any examples of how Kaggle has impacted your professional skill set or your professional life?
Yes, I think they've been pretty closely intertwined, actually, because a lot of the things that I've applied as a data scientist, I either first saw on Kaggle, or I saw somewhere else, and then would research Kaggle to see what others were doing. One good example is like with unsupervised learning. And so I was working on a project where we were trying to basically classify vendors. We were trying to identify vendors based on their behavior and find the ones who were not acting within the current guidelines, is probably the best way to put it. We had all this transaction data. We had millions of rows of transaction data. And so one of the things I had learned about on Kaggle was Teasney. And so, that's an unsupervised method where you can, it's reducing dimensions. It's dimensionality reduction, but you're taking all these different variables, all these different factors, and you're transforming it into a two-dimensional plot. And you just look at the plot and you see how these objects are grouped, or how these, how in this case, how the vendors were grouped. And so, yeah, I learned a lot about it and some good tips and tricks in there, and was able to apply that in my job. Also, I think at some point, I had a client who wanted to do a lot of things in Python. And at the time I was, like I said, working primarily in R. And so I was up front. I said, well, I'm, not really all that good at Python. I'm a beginner. And they said, we don't care. Well, you do what you can. And so that worked out. So I got on Kaggle, and I would look at, for a certain competition, I would look at an R notebook, and then I would look at a Python notebook. And in a lot of cases now, you can even see where somebody wrote something and then somebody else ported it to the other language as a comparison. So that sort of thing has just been very valuable to me. The ability to just go in and kind of get sort of latest, almost leading edge techniques, really good, well-structured code, that sort of thing. And that's probably another thing. I don't come from a developer background at all. And so like writing good code is not something that came naturally to me. And there's different definitions of that, of course.
Yeah.
But I'd say like writing good data science code. Just good language, nice and tight, not overly hierarchical, all that good stuff. I learned most of that from other people. A lot of times, the guys I work with now.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about the competition where you absolutely knock it out of the park, quite literally the NFL competitions. But before we talk about your recent win, can you help us set the stage about the competition and what's it all about? And I think it's one of the unique competitions where you actually got to create a ripple in the world, impact in the world. So we'll also talk about that in a bit.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, the NFL has sponsored two competitions over the past couple of years, and the first one was last year, about a year and some months ago, and it was sponsored by the Health and Safety Group. So professional football, we're talking about American football, of course. Professional football in the U.S. Is a dangerous sport. There are a lot of people getting hurt, and at the time, and still, concussions became a big thing. And a lot of players are getting concussions, and the NFL had been taking measures for a couple of years to reduce concussions. And then I don't know how it started exactly, but they decided to release their data publicly to the data science community on Kaggle and ask for help. And it was a pretty bold move, right? Because you think about how sports groups and other companies protect their data like that. A lot of times the last thing they do is put it out there for people to look at, because you can start finding things and maybe pointing fingers, where you shouldn't, and whatnot. So they did that, and it was I think it was a big success. It was exciting because it was sports related and people like that, but also I liked it because it was safety related. So we weren't just trying to make, people run faster or go farther on a play. It was like to keep people from getting hurt. And so they've done that now for 2 years. And the format is an analytics competition, they call it. And there have been just a couple of those. I think Kaggle just released a third one in the past few days. Analytics competitions are quite different from the typical machine learning comp on Kaggle. They, instead of having a specific training set and test set of data and maybe some other data and being asked to provide a machine learning model, you're given some data, you're given the context, and then you're basically given a goal. So you're given a business objective, right? So in this case, the first one was, we want changes to the rules. We're asking for recommended changes to our current rules that will help reduce concussions and specifically on punts, on punt plays. So a punt, and a punt, for if you don't follow football, is just a type of kick that occurs during the course of play. So when a team can't advance the ball any further, they can choose on fourth down, or any down really, to punt the ball away. And so it's a freestanding kick.
I'm sorry, what's a fourth down and the other term you had mentioned?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, I make assumptions here. So in football, players typically, or teams typically have 4 tries. They have 4 tries to go 10 yards.
Okay.
And so football is a little bit unique in that it's not a fluid game. It's a series of plays that start and stop. And so when a play starts, they call it the line of scrimmage. And so you start the play, you get to run the ball or pass the ball until the play stops. Either someone gets tackled or the ball's dropped, what have you. And then they start the second play at that point. So you get to advance the ball forward, hopefully, 4 times. If you make it to 10 yards, then they reset your downs and you have 4 more downs to go another 10. Okay. If you get to fourth down and you still have a long ways to go, say you still have 8 yards to go, chances are you're going to want to punt the ball and kick it away. So they bring in a punter, and the punter, basically takes the ball from the snapper and just kicks it, standing up kick. Kind of free kicks it as far as he can or to the right place, and then there's somebody down there waiting to catch it and run it back.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and what happens is it's just a very chaotic play. There are people running in at high rates of speed from the other side of the field at all different times, and it can be dangerous. And so yeah, they have a fair amount of concussions, probably at the time anyway, close to twice the rate of concussions on a
Okay,
punt with a typical play.
got
Yeah.
it.
So yeah, that was the objective. They said, "Hey, this is the objective," and then what we were asked to do was to analyze the data and submit a report. And so that was really the final product, was a report and also a few slides, so sort of an overview slide deck that contained your recommendations, your methodology, your analysis, show your work, all that good stuff. And then they were going to take that and find the analysis and the reports that they thought would give them the most advantage.
I've been wondering all this while, and maybe if you, as an NFL fan, could elaborate, why is NFL called football and not handball or hand egg?
Hide egg. I like that one. Yes. That question came up, I think, at the competition last year. People were like, why is this even called football? And so, so somebody researched it and I brushed up on it. It goes back to the origin of the game, so like football in America has been around since I think like the early 1900s or so.
Okay,
And it actually came from rugby football and soccer. And so those sports all kind of come from the same lineage. And I think at some point someone was, calling it rugby football or Australian football at the time or what have you. And so they started calling this game football. And it was really more about like running the ball and that sort of thing. So it looked a lot like rugby, I think, in those early days. And then over time, especially like in the last 10 years, and especially in professional football, it's really become all about passing. Like there's so much passing that happens now. You wouldn't even, probably recognize the game from when we were kids and everyone was running it. I mean, it's still the same game, but the dynamics have changed as, as people change in technology and passing ability, all that good stuff.
awesome. Now, talking about how the dynamics have changed, and you're a contributor to this, you're a proud contributor to this. I'll definitely have your amazing kernel linked in the show notes. So please, audience, do check it out. But if you could also share with us in an audio format of your discoveries this year and what interesting changes did that lead to?
Yeah, sure. So, at the competition last year, the NFL chose 4 finalists out of the participants, and I was one of the finalists. And then we all went to Atlanta that year to present to the NFL, and they took it very seriously. They actually, I found out that they had the head of the rules committee. I think it's technically called the competitions committee, but the guy that runs the competitions committee for the NFL actually reviewed the reports, and he read all of the reports, and he was there for the presentation. The head of health and safety and the health and safety team were all there, and the commissioner of the NFL was there. His name's Roger Goodell. He's on TV all the time talking about football. He's there as well, and so they took it very seriously, and they very quickly, I think what happened is they very quickly looked at the different ideas to figure out what they could use. And I had one recommendation that they happened to like, and that was involving something called a blindside block. And so what happens on a punt is that, the ball is kicked across the field. Somebody on the receiving team catches it and starts running. Well, people from the team that kicked the ball, if you can imagine, are running now down to tackle that person with the ball. And as they're running to tackle, what first happens is when the play starts, the people who are on the receiving team, they have people there that are just trying to actually tackle the punter before he can punt the ball. And so that's what, they're trying to tackle the punter, but almost always the punter gets that ball out. And so they have to turn around and go help their teammate who just caught the ball. And what happens is you have people coming in, just from all different angles and this, and there's this blindside block where a player is fixated on tackling someone, and someone from the other team comes in from behind or from a rear sort of quarter and just hits them hard. And that has been legal in the past as long as it's a clean block. In other words, it's not below the waist, it's not to the head, it's not head first. It's just a slam up against the person from behind. The
So,
problem,
sorry, just to
yeah,
understand, the block here also refers to a tackle, or I'm not sure why the term is block.
sure. So a block is a little bit different, although they can look the same and they can result in the same. A tackle is specifically against a person holding the ball.
Okay.
So if I'm holding the ball and you come jump on me and take me down, that's a tackle.
Okay.
If I don't have the ball and you come flying in and hit me as hard as you can to knock me across the room, that's a block.
Got it.
Yeah. Or sometimes blocks are more passive, where you're just standing still and you're not letting me around you. That's also a block. But in a punt, these blocks are pretty violent collisions. And you can imagine, like, if you see somebody coming toward you and they hit you, body to body, you're expecting it and you might go somewhere, but you'll probably get up and be okay. If someone hits you from behind when you're planning on something else and you don't know what's happening, it can mess you up.
Yeah.
For one thing, I mean, your head's going to have movement that it wouldn't have otherwise, and so that's the big thing, is the head acceleration. A lot of people, because there are several people in the same space at the same time, a lot of helmets knocked together, that sort of thing, and so it turned out to be a pretty dangerous play. So one of the things that I recommended was, in certain cases, which are when everybody is running back basically toward that person catching the ball, in the running back sort of away from the other goal line, blindside blocks should not be allowed, because they're not as crucial to what a blocker does. And it's without getting into the dynamics too much, it's not a huge part of the game as much as it just gets people hurt. So, wait for everyone to turn around and then do what you want, then block them, do your football thing. But anyway, that's what I recommended, and showed them, that it would reduce, some number of concussions per year. Not a huge amount, but it was, probably at least like 6 to 8 concussions per year, which, over a 10-year period that maybe a player has, that's pretty significant. So yeah, the NFL heard that and they acted on it very quickly. And before this current season started, which would have been back in July or August for the preseason, they had done their homework on it. They took that recommendation to the team owners, and the team owners approved it. And so it's approved as a conditional rule, I think, where they're going to test it out for a year or two and then decide whether to keep it. So far, I think it's been pretty positive from a football perspective. Fans don't always like it, because there are a lot of fans out there that still like the hits and like all that stuff, and so there's a bit of a mindset change that goes with it, where you have to kind of make sure people understand that it's not good when players get concussions for in the long term. So
For sure.
so that was really cool. It was really cool to see that, and then just to see any company sort of act on something is fun. But being in sports, I think it was extra fun for me.
Okay, awesome. Again, for the audience, all of these in depth will be linked in the show notes, so please go ahead and check those out. Now, I want to ask this question for all of us grandmaster aspirants or master aspirants. Do you think driverless AI can help us become a master or a grandmaster even?
Let's see. Yes, I mean, I think it can help you be a lot better. So specifically for Kaggle, I would say no, not really, because the machine learning competitions are open source. And so if you win a competition and you use driverless AI, then you're going to have to answer to how you got there, and someone will see. But I mean, to the less literal part, yeah, absolutely. There's some things. I don't know if it would truly get you to like a grandmaster level, because there's still, like we said, some things that people have to do. But it definitely adds a lot of power to your toolkit. So And I can say for me, like, I'm usually pretty good at dissecting the problem up front, and I can find some good features. So when I go to feature engineering, I'll come up with some good domain-based features that I think work pretty well, different aggregations, all that sort of thing. But then, like, when it comes to trying 80 different algorithms and hyper tuning parameters and selecting features, that takes me a lot of time. And there are some things I just don't know, or maybe I heard about it a long time ago, and then I forgot, and I don't have a good system, because I think that's one thing a lot of grandmasters have, is they have a good system to test and iterate through these things. Driverless AI does that. Like, it has the iteration already built in, and it tries all of the different things. I mean, it was programmed by grandmasters and continues to be, as they use their prize-winning techniques from Kaggle. And so that's a big part of it anyway. And so, yeah, it will definitely help you build a better machine learning model. I don't. And I'm relatively new to the company, but I've been aware of the product for probably about 3 years now, 2 or 3 years. And I don't know of a case yet. I'm sure there is one, but most of the cases I've seen, the driverless AI model will improve on what people have already done, and will even like do it in just a lot less time. And so it becomes pretty compelling for them to see that, okay, hey, this is good stuff for us.
Okay. Now, I apologize. I've only had 11 cups of chai today, so I'm a little chai deprived. But I think I missed your this year's contribution to NFL. I think the blindside blog was from the previous year's solution. Could you
Yes.
elaborate about your findings from this year? And again, it's also available as a kernel where you shared the report for the audience.
Yeah, definitely. So this year, the competition was about reducing lower limb injuries. So that's knees, ankles, and feet. And it's also a very big problem for the NFL, and for players, for teams, not only because of the injury, but it's the severity. I mean, it's not the number of injuries per se, although there are a lot. It's the severity. There are a lot of ACL tears. So the ACL is a ligament in the knee, anterior crucial ligament, I believe. It basically keeps your lower leg from hyperextending and such. And it's very easy to tear in a sport like football, where there's a lot of lateral movement. I think soccer players must also have a fair amount of ACL tears. Basketball, it's pretty common to sports like that. And so the NFL wanted to do something about that. They wanted to reduce those. They also wanted to have a special look. They wanted to reduce those in the context of looking at synthetic turf versus natural turf. And so in the NFL right now, you have about 2/3 of the stadiums using natural grass, and about 1/3 using synthetic of some sort.
Okay.
And there's been, ever since it was invented, AstroTurf was the big popular brand. Ever since AstroTurf was invented, there have been, just stories and people saying that, that sort of surface grips your foot a lot more. And so when you do a hard cutting maneuver or move to the side, your leg doesn't free up, and that wreaks havoc on your knees and ankles. And so, the industry has tried to improve over time and come up with, next generation products. And I think they've done that somewhat. But it's still an issue. And from time to time, there are studies that come out that say, hey, look, there's definitely a higher, rate of injury on synthetic turf, especially, either under certain conditions, or if players are wearing a certain cleat pattern, these kinds of things. So that was the challenge. We were also given data on the environment. So was it raining? Was it cold? That kind of thing. Was it an open stadium or closed stadium? We got, let's see. Oh, we had movement data. So yeah, that was the big thing. So we also had the movement data, where it's pretty cool that, the NFL puts a sensor now in every player's shoulder pad.
Okay.
And what it does is it tracks their movement during the entire course of a play, every play. And it takes those measurements about 10 times per second. So you can get this data. They call it next gen stats. NGS. You can get this NGS data, and you can recreate a play, and you can look at player movement. You can look at speed, velocity. You can look at acceleration, either directional or linear. Get a lot of different things out of it, and from that, you can start to estimate forces on the legs and all this good stuff. So we had all this data, and the NFL didn't ask specifically for any kind of change this year. They didn't ask for a rules change or anything. They more generally asked for insights, any ideas into what's going on, and then if you had some recommendations, throw those out there. Of course, everyone likes to have a recommendation. Hey, what do we do with this? But I think they were equally interested in just the insight. So that was the issue that we all looked at. And so, I approached that sort of the same way. I did a lot of upfront domain research this time, more so than I did last year. Just a lot of research to understand like what has been done in terms of research of synthetic to natural. What do players think? Can you find like player ratings? What are some of the economics of the whole thing, that go into either putting synthetic or natural? Because that's, there's two things probably that have driven that sort of, the likelihood of synthetic turf. One is just the ability to grow grass in some climates, in some places. It's hard. If you have a closed stadium, you're not going to be able to grow grass. And so some places like domes and that sort of thing, which now they're actually doing that now. Just an aside, the new stadium being built in Las Vegas is either closed roof or retractable, but they're having natural grass. And so
Okay.
their field is built on a giant football field sized tray. And I guess it's about 4 feet thick. And after the games, they pull this giant tray of grass out and they go put it in the sun to grow in their
Interesting.
growing area. Yeah. And then they put it back in for the game. So, I did all this research to try to understand, talk to different people to figure out what's going on. And then, did the analysis. I used machine learning, supervised machine learning, and I aggregated the data up to the player level and tried to see what was going on. And what I found was that synthetic turf does make a difference. It does appear to be a factor, and I can't say it does make a difference. What I can say is that for the sample provided, it did make a difference, and it appears to be an important factor, but in my opinion, not as important as other things like the acceleration, the accelerative forces, sometimes the environment. So if it was raining or snowing, that sort of thing, or the days of rest. That was probably the big thing that occurred, was the days of rest between games. So, if you have players that are playing over and over and getting a lot of hard work, and it's a tough game, they're going to get hurt even if you play on the best surface available. I mean, that's, I presented that and I packaged that into my report and sent it in, and was selected again as a finalist, and I got to go to Miami this year. I did not get Super Bowl tickets, but I got to go and have a good time in Miami and meet a lot of NFL folks and present my findings. I think the thing that they may have launched in or latched onto is that part about the rest between games, the player rest. The NFL is also considering changing their schedule. Maybe more games. They're considering, hey, do we want more games in the regular season? Do we want to take some of the preseason games and make those regular season? Do we just want to have players play for an extra 2 weeks per year? All sorts of options are on the table. And I think this data can help them, provide some insight and to say, well, wait a minute, we have to watch the rest because that may be an important factor also. That was one thing. I guess the other thing I showed was that, there's a huge difference between the number of games that different teams play on synthetic fields. You have teams, if you look back it's almost every year, but if you go back to 2018, which is I think the data we had, there's one team played one game out of 16 on synthetic. Another team
Interesting.
played, and another team played 13. And you had everything in between. So maybe there's something that you can do with the schedule and home games versus away games, and some of the rules around that to sort of even that out a little bit to prevent a team from having to play 13 games on synthetic or what have you.
Interesting. I think this approach also really speaks to, so a new Kaggle might just look at the data and try fancy things, and you went ahead through the efforts of even looking outside and really understanding all of the publicly available ideas that you could and gather that information and try to bring that into your solution.
Yes. Yeah. And, I've, when I first started Kaggling, I read, several sort of how-tos from the current, grandmaster and master population. And the advice that kept coming up, and you'll still see, is that don't just jump in and start machine learning. It's very tempting to take your train set and run XGBoost on it and see what comes out. And it's okay to do that, but really, the advice that they'll give and that I like is that, just wait, think about the problem, sort of look at the data, explore it, just kind of think about, what might be important and take that approach. And then, once you've considered the problem and done all of your exploratory analysis, then start putting some models to it and see what you get.
Awesome. If you were to give one final best advice to someone who's just starting machine learning or Kaggle, what would that be?
Let's see. I would say get engaged, like get involved, not just with competitions, but with the community. Ask questions in the discussion forums. Put a notebook out there, even if you don't think it's very good. Ask people to give their opinion on it. I mean, just, do that sort of thing, learn from others and do that. It's really easy. And I think I was a little guilty of it to, just kind of focus on my learning and not even really ask questions, just kind of do research. I didn't team up with others. I waited a long time to publish my first notebook. And I would say, if I had to do over again, what I would advise is just get out there and do it. And you'll be surprised. It's a great community. People are very helpful, and it's a good thing.
Awesome. Before we end the call, what would be the best platforms to follow your work apart from obviously Kaggle?
Oh, let's see. I try to keep I try to keep relevant with Twitter and just keep good information flowing through there. When I come across things, so you could possibly follow me on Twitter. I've been a little bit boring lately. I'm going to try to get back on that. That's probably the only one. I mean, we have this podcast now. I have some things on GitHub, but no real big deal. So yeah, probably Kaggle is where I contribute the most to the community, I think.
Okay, audience, please do remember to check out the show notes if you're interested. John, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, and thank you so much for all of your contributions to data science and the NFL world, so to speak.
Thanks, Sanyam. Best to you also.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give it a review or feel free to shoot me a message. You can find all of the social media links in the description. If you like the show, please subscribe and tune in each week to Chai Time Data Science.